Picture this, it's 1982, and Ritchie Blackmore, the guitarist who fired band members almost as often as he changed guitar strings, is about to do something he's never done before. He's going to keep his band together, no purges, no blow-ups, no mid-album personal bloodbath. Just 5 guys, 1 studio buried in Canadian snow, and 5 weeks to make the most commercially successful record of Rainbow's career. But getting there meant losing 1 keyboard player to Ozzy Osbourne, gambling on a 23-year-old nobody straight out of college, and putting out an album so controversial that even the legendary art house that made it got torn apart by critics. This is the story of Straight Between the Eyes. Let's start with a departure that almost derailed everything before a single note was recorded. Don Airey had been Rainbow's keyboardist through the difficult-to-cure era, and he was exactly what you'd expect from a Blackmore recruit. Heavy, classically trained, and built for the aggressive, dramatic style that defined Rainbow's earlier records. But by 1981, Blackmore had a new obsession: cracking the American market. He was pushing the band toward a more radio-friendly commercial rock sound, and Airey wasn't having it. He had signed up for neoclassical fire, not FM-friendly hooks, and the frustration built until he was done. And here's the kicker: while Airey was stewing in his unhappiness, Ozzy Osbourne came calling. They wanted him to play keyboards on tour and in the studio for the Diary of a Madman and Bark at the Moon albums. His decision to leave was largely prompted by an unexpected phone call from drummer Coach Powell, who had also just left Rainbow, and also told Airey to immediately get a flight to New York to join Ozzy's group. So now Blackmore and producer Roger Glover have a problem. They need a keyboardist who can handle Rainbow's classically infused, technically brutal arrangements, but they also want someone who fits this new commercial direction. Instead of poaching another established rock veteran, they did something unusual. They held open auditions in New York. In October 1981, over 50 keyboard players showed up hoping for the gig. The guy who walked away with it was a total unknown. 20 years old, fresh out of Berklee College of Music, named David Rosenthal. He had the flawless classical technique Blackmore demanded, and just as important, he was young enough that he wasn't going to challenge Blackmore's authority in the band. Rosenthal blew them away in the audition, handling the band's complicated structures with ease, and was hired on the spot. One minute he's a college kid, the next he's thrown into a world tour and straight into the recording sessions for Straight Between the Eyes. Rosenthal turned out to be the perfect fit for this new commercial era Rainbow. Years later, he go on to become the longtime music director for Billy Joel. With that lineup locked in, the band did something else Blackmore rarely allowed. They rehearsed properly. The band gathered in Vermont for focused writing sessions before ever stepping into the studio, and because everyone had already gelled as a unit, there was none of the usual ego friction. Roger Glover, who produced the record, later called this his easiest experience producing Rainbow. Glover, Blackmore, and Turner ended up sharing most of the songwriting credits. From Vermont, the band moved to Le Studio in Morton Heights, Quebec, a residential studio recommended to Glover by the band Nazareth. The place sat next to a frozen lake, buried under 2 to 3 feet of snow, completely isolated. And because the band showed up already prepared for those Vermont rehearsals, the actual recording process was lightning fast. The whole album was tracked in just 5 weeks. Even with a more commercial direction, Blackmore's classical instincts never disappeared. The solo on Death Ellie Driver was written as a deliberate homage to Johann Sebastian Bach. Once chord tracking wrapped, Blackmore, Rosenthal, and Glover headed to Montreal to record live orchestral overdubs with the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Francois Dompierre, adding massive scale to tracks like the album's closer, Eyes of Fire. The record was then digitally mixed by Glover and engineer Nick Blagonia at Le Studio and mastered by Greg Calby at Sterling Sound in New York. So where does the name Straight Between the Eyes even come from? According to Blackmore, it traces back to a 1967 conversation with Jeff Beck. The two guitarists were talking about Jimi Hendrix, and Beck described how Hendrix's revolutionary playing hit him straight between the eyes. That phrase apparently stuck with Blackmore for 15 years before he finally used it as an album title in 1982. The album kicks off with Death Alley Driver, written by Blackmore and Lynn Turner. It's built purely for adrenaline. Fans and critics immediately clocked the resemblance to Highway Star, that same driving, relentless rhythm Blackmore had perfected back in his Deep Purple days. and that Bach-inspired guitar solo we just talked about. This is where it lives, high-speed neoclassical runs fused with pure energy, heavy metal aggression. The music video leaned into the song's racing theme too, opening with someone playing Sega arcade game Turbo before cutting to live-action motorcycle footage. Turner's lyrics follow a reckless motorcycle rider tearing down dangerous roads, outrunning the law in the whole way. In my personal opinion, this song actually reminds me of 80s Judas Priest, especially Heading Out to the Highway, which came out, I think, a year before that. But right after the heavy metal song, the album shifts gears with Stone Cold, a haunting mid-tempo power ballad that became Rainbow's first and only top 40 hit in the United States, peaking at number 40 on the Billboard Hot 100 and topping the top rock tracks chart. And the story behind the lyric is genuinely heartbreaking. While Rainbow was touring for the previous album, Joel and Turner walked past Roger Glover's hotel room and found him completely despondent. His wife had just left him for a race car driver. When Turner asked what was wrong, Glover looked up and said, "She just stone cold up and left me." Turner ran back to his room and wrote the lyrics on the spot. For Blackmore, who'd taken plenty of heat from old school fans for chasing a commercial sound, the success of Stone Cold was validation that the gamble had paid off. And unlike most Rainbow songs built around Blackmore's guitar work, this was arranged specifically to put Turner's vocal front and center. The remaining 7 tracks basically function as a seesaw between Rainbow's 2 identities. On the commercial side, you got Bring On the Night, Dream Chaser, Tight Squeeze, and Rock Fever. Polished, hook-driven, built for American arena crowds. On the heavier side, Mistreated, and Power bring back the pounding riffs and classic hard rock aggression, while Tearing Out My Heart gives Turner a chance to get gritty instead of polished. And for the closer, Eyes of Fire fuses both worlds together, a dark, Eastern-tinged riff reminiscent of Stargazer, wrapped in the full cinematic weight of that Montreal Symphony Orchestra recording. Now let's talk about the cover, because the thing caused a firestorm. It's a graphic photorealistic illustration of a human skull with 2 wide, traumatized green eyes and a Fender Stratocaster headstock smashed directly into the forehead, bone and skin fragments flying outward, brutal and completely literal. The real controversy wasn't the image itself, it was who made it. The cover was designed by Hipgnosis, the legendary British studio behind iconic, mysterious high-concept work for Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, working alongside illustrator Jeff Cummins. When a studio known for sophisticated photography art history delivers something this loud and comic book literal, the rock community was stunned. The critics tore into it, and some called it one of Hipgnosis' very worst pieces of work, and it still shows up on lists of the weirdest, most unfortunate classic rock covers. Blackmore didn't shy away from it either. On the 1982 tour, the stage featured a giant pair of mechanical eyes with spotlights built into the pupils, sweeping the crowd and blasting fans straight between the eyes during the heavier songs, a gimmick fans either loved or found completely obnoxious. And there was one more, a smaller dispute buried in the packaging, the track Mistreated. On the sleeve, the word Miss was printed 3 times larger than Mistreated. Blackmore admitted in a 1982 Kerrang interview that it was deliberate. He wanted to make sure that absolutely nobody confused it with Mistreated, the song he'd co-written with David Coverdale for Deep Purple's Burn back in 1974. No legal confusion, no accusations of recycling old material, just a formatting choice built entirely to protect himself. Straight Between the Eyes gave Rainbow the first real taste of mainstream American success, but success like that comes with pressure. Next time, we're following up the band with a follow-up record, and Blackmore has this new stabilized lineup to try to chase that same commercial lightning twice. That will be the story of Bent Out of Shape, and it's where the cracks of this era Rainbow really start to show. So that will be coming soon. I still have a few more other Deep Purple related albums to talk about, because I have videos from Gillan and Whitesnake coming up. But I'll circle back to Rainbow after that. Check out the playlist, should be on your screen right now, and it has the entire story of Deep Purple from the beginning, and I'm talking about adjacent bands. Right now I'm in 1982. Once it gets to 1984, Deep Purple reunites, and then I'll talk mostly Deep Purple and Whitesnake from that point forward. So, like, subscribe, see you in the next one.